There is a big problem for several car owners who went to a Southington gas station. We're being told the wrong types of fuel came out of the pumps, and this caused some major damage.
Used the diesel pump, but it turns out what he was pumping into his truck.
Dealership told me it was probably contaminated fuel, whether it's the wrong fuel or maybe it's water.
Most drivers never realize the exact moment their engine begins to die. There's no smoke, no dramatic shutdown on the freeway, no warning light begging for attention. Engine death doesn't explode into existence. It drifts in quietly. It starts as a small rattle on a cold morning, so soft you tell yourself it's nothing. Then a slight hesitation as you merge onto the highway, a little sluggishness climbing a hill. You blame age, you blame the weather, you blame anything except the truth. Something is slowly breaking down inside your engine, because engines don't lie. And when they're fed weak, dirty gasoline, they age faster than anyone expects. Mechanics see it before anyone else does. Cars limping into their shops like they can barely breathe, coughing through acceleration, choking under load, struggling to idle. And every time the intake manifold comes off, the same grim scene appears. Valves buried in black carbon, injectors dripping with varnish, pistons scarred and beaten long before their time. Drivers always ask, how did this happen? Mechanics never respond with a part number. They respond with a gas station, because somewhere along the way, without realizing it, a driver pulled into the wrong pump and poisoned their own engine. The quiet killers. If you ask veteran mechanics which fuel sends the most broken engines into their bays, they never hesitate. They start with Arco. Arco looks like a bargain. Cheap prices, constant traffic, lines of drivers who swear they're beating the system, but behind the savings is a brutal truth. Arco isn't top-tier certified. Its fuel has weak detergents, and modern engines depend on detergents to stay alive. A mechanic in Phoenix opened the intake of a Camry that ran almost exclusively on Arco. It had just 72,000 miles, practically young, yet inside, the engine looked like it had survived a decade of neglect. Valves coated in tar, injectors barely spraying, carbon baked onto every surface. The driver saved a few cents. They paid thousands for repairs. And Arco isn't alone. Another familiar name sits quietly in neighborhoods across America. 7-Eleven. Clean stores, national reputation, a brand people assume is safe. But 7-Eleven doesn't refine gasoline. They buy whatever's cheapest that week. One tank might be fine. The next might be a disaster. In Dallas, a mechanic drained fuel from a misfiring Camry and found cloudy gasoline testing at 18% ethanol, even though the pump claimed 10%. That excess ethanol was eating the injectors alive. In Orlando, a driver made it 3 miles before their car stalled in the middle of traffic. Inspectors later shut down the pumps due to water contamination. Cheap fuel isn't a deal, it's a trap disguised as convenience. The brands that look safe until you open the engine. At nearly every Walmart parking lot, you'll find Murphy USA, a station known for one thing, being cheap, but mechanics dread it for the same reason. Cheap fuel comes with weak detergents, and weak detergents leave engines suffocating. A 2017 Silverado rolled into a Louisiana shop after years of Murphy USA fill-ups. The idle was rough. The engine stalled in traffic. Power dropped dramatically, and when the mechanic removed the spark plugs, every one was coated in thick black soot. The cylinders had carbon scoring. The catalytic converter was beginning to clog. The owner saved maybe a few $100s in fuel over the years, then spent $3,200 fixing the damage. And right behind Murphy USA is another polished trap, Circle K. Bright stores, clean branding, a reputation that feels reliable. But Circle K has one major problem. They don't produce their own gasoline. They buy it locally, cheaply, and inconsistently. In 2022, a Circle K in Texas was shut down after inspectors found water pooling in the underground tanks. Drivers filled up, drove minutes down the road, and their engines began sputtering violently. A South Carolina mechanic opened the tank of an SUV that filled up at Circle K and found gasoline so saturated with water, the injectors had begun to corrode. The fuel pump was ruined. Total damage? $3,400. Some gasoline destroys engines slowly, others do it in a single tank. The highway traps. On long road trips, families instinctively trust the massive, well-lit travel centers along the freeway. The biggest of them all, Pilot, Flying J. Truckers trust it, travelers rely on it. But the gasoline in those tanks isn't cycling the way diesel does, and gasoline that sits becomes a silent weapon. A Tennessee mechanic remembers a minivan that filled up at Pilot Flying J before heading across the state. 73 miles later, the van barely crawled into his shop. The engine sounded like it was suffocating. When he drained the tank, the fuel came out as green jelly, microbial growth feeding on moisture. The injectors weren't just clogged, they were dissolving. And Pilot Flying J's history makes this worse. The company was once caught in a massive rebate fraud scheme. Cutting corners wasn't an accident, it was a pattern. And if fuel contamination scares you, the next category is worse, much worse. The only trusted names that lost their quality. Some brands cause damage because they're not unknown, but because they used to be respected. Take Amoco. The name carries nostalgia. Many drivers remember it as premium, reliable fuel, but today's Amoco is just BP's low-cost blend with a familiar logo slapped on the pump. In Michigan, a mechanic opened a Malibu with 61,000 miles, and the inside looked like it had 200,000. The valves were buried in carbon. Injectors needed full replacement. Years of weak detergent fuel had slowly suffocated the engine. Then there's Sunoco, the racing brand. The logo alone makes drivers feel confident, but the fuel used in NASCAR has nothing to do with what goes into your daily driver. Mechanics see problems constantly: knocking, carbon buildup, premature injector wear. A BMW 330i owner found out the hard way. After 6 months of using Sunoco regular, the car's high-pressure pump failed. The valves wouldn't seal. Injectors were shot. The repair cost? $4,100. The racing reputation didn't save his engine. The worst cases in fuel history. Some stories sound too extreme to be true until you see the evidence. Across multiple states, investigators discovered that certain distributors were blending hazardous waste into gasoline. Not impurities, not low detergents, actual toxic waste. Used oil, industrial solvents, chemical byproducts. One of the companies responsible? Lamb Fuels. They were caught selling contaminated gasoline to ordinary stations, fuel so corrosive it destroyed engines almost instantly. In Nevada, a family filled their tank and drove just 31 miles before their engine seized completely. The toxic fuel stripped away the engine oil and shredded the internals. Nothing could be saved. Mechanics still talk about it as the darkest chapter in fuel history. And the scariest part is, drivers never saw it coming. The brands that protect engines. For every brand that destroys engines, there are a few that consistently save them. Mechanics can identify engines that run on good fuel within seconds. They look cleaner, sound smoother, and survive far longer than expected. A technician in Colorado inspected a 400,000-mile Ram 1500 that ran almost exclusively on Chevron with Techron. When he scoped the cylinders, he expected heavy wear. Instead, he found valves so clean they looked nearly new. In Ohio, another mechanic swears by Shell V-Power, saying it polishes engines from the inside. Direct injection engines that normally choke on carbon stayed surprisingly clean. Costco often shocks people. They assume cheap fuel means low quality, but Costco has some of the strictest detergent standards in the industry. Mechanics praise it, engines love it. And ExxonMobil remains one of the strongest top-tier brands available. Their additives prevent carbon buildup before it forms, keeping injectors spraying cleanly and engines breathing freely. These brands don't rely on neon signs or marketing gimmicks. Their engines tell the story for them, the truth most drivers never hear. Every time you pull up to a pump, you make a choice, whether you realize it or not. Cheap fuel now or expensive repairs later. A few cents saved or years of engine life lost. Some gasoline quietly destroys engines. Some keeps them alive for hundreds of thousands of miles. Your engine can't choose what you put into it. It can only live or die based on the decision you make at the pump. So the next time your hand closes around that nozzle, pause for a moment. Think about the engines that never stood a chance, choked by the wrong fuel, dying long before their time, because every seized pump, every ruined injector, every $1,000 repair, it all begins with a single gallon, and the fuel you choose today decides the engine you'll have tomorrow.